Волнам ребристым через океан ехали туристы к русским берегам. Понимать друг друга люди все должны. Едут к нам туристы из любой страны. Мы гостеприимный край покажем нам.
We were all happy to be on this first flight, the inaugural, that would open the air route between Anchorage, Alaska, and the Soviet Far East. This is the route of the first commercial flight to Siberia and to the city of Khabarovsk in Soviet Asia. Anatoly Pleshkov, communications man, and Valentin Jurin, navigator, crew member, photographers, some professional and a great number of others, all seemed to be busy recording this flight that we felt was certain to promote goodwill between the United States and the Soviet Union. As the Soviet crew member said, I am sure these flights will make us all better friends. Lowell Thomas was one of the many dignitaries. Once we were airborne, everyone was in a party mood, and the serving of breakfast was a welcome sight, as many got up an hour early just to be ready in time. The Golden Samovar service set the mood for this Russian adventure, with stewardesses in Russian tunics, serving caviar and stroganoff. The sight of the Siberian coast brought everyone to the windows. The sight was a green, forested, rolling countryside. We received a most heartwarming welcome here at Khabarovsk, and we lined up for pictures of this historic flight. Next, a stop at the State Bank inside the terminal building for some Russian rubles. Our bags, meantime, were given only a passing inspection. Then the tour service whisked the luggage off to our hotel. Our hotel, which is seen here, the hotel in Khabarovsk, which was quite new and modern. Every room had private bath and furnishings were bright. Our English-speaking guides were remarkably friendly, began telling us about this interesting, strange, frontier-like city of 400,000. The city is 300 years old. Under a treaty in 1689, the Russians abandoned this area and it became Chinese territory. 200 years later, the Russians returned to Khabarovsk in 1868 and colonized the town. This new town became important because of its position on the crossroads of transportation. Here, the Amur River swings around northeastward to the sea, where Vladivostok is the famous harbor and naval base for the USSR. This is actually a beach scene in Siberia, where the temperature was about 85 degrees. This museum in Khabarovsk shows the early explorations by Russian adventurers to the coast of Alaska. Also on display, a collection of lore of the region from the past centuries. One of the many reminders of the early ownership of Alaska by the Russian Tsar. In the evening, the Diesel Workers dance group performed for us. The gala dinner that evening in the very elegant hotel dining room was something to remember, with about 50 different kinds of food and beverage. The woman mayor of Khabarovsk gave a toast on the historic occasion of the first commercial flight and hoped the event was the beginning of a large number of tourists who would come to Russia to meet the people so we could get better acquainted, as she said it. This is Irkutsk, our second stop, and our surprisingly modern hotel. It was to be our home for the next 4 days. A across the street from our hotel, this green park area. There were many college students here, studying for finals, as they said, eager to make friends with us and express their curiosity about life in the United States. One of our first events was a visit with the mayor of the city. He gave us a very warm welcome and spoke of the opportunity for friendship between our countries by visits such as this. And there was an exchange of gifts. One of the very early explorers to Alaska was Georgy Shelikov of Irkutsk, whose grave is here at the Church of the Crucifixion. Shelikov was a scientist, historian, and was schooled in the geography of the day. With his wife, he sailed to Alaska from here in 1783. With 3 ships he built from timber he cut from the Siberian forest. Shelikov established the Russian-American Company and established a plan for the trading of furs throughout all of Asia. This Russian explorer of Alaska is buried here in Irkutsk, the monument to his life in the churchyard of the Church of the Crucifixion. Nearby, this museum in Irkutsk contains maps of the journeys of Shelikov. These rough renditions of the Aleutian Islands and the coastline of Alaska clearly show the first beginnings of the fur commerce that Russia was to establish in the New World and continue to rule until the purchase of Alaska by the United States in 1867. Also seen in the museum here on Karl Marx Street is a historical collection of garments from the days of the Tsars. This gold dredge used here in the gold fields and is very much like those that have been used for years in Alaska. On the same street is found this structure called the White House. It's remembered as the general headquarters of the Revolutionary Army and the Red Army during the Great Revolution. Today it's a library and a monument to the communist takeover of power in Russia. School children were on tour here, studying the history of Russia. And as well, the children of Siberia seem to spend much time in the open air and parks. This is the Polytechnic Institute of Irkutsk with an enrollment of about 20,000 students. The study here is for 5 years, and in order to be accepted, the requirement is to pass an examination. The Institute charges no tuition, and housing and accommodation is nearby, which is also free. A stipend is paid some students. During the course of study, the examinations are given by a board made up of the leaders of industry who come to the Institute to give the examination. Their decision on the results of the testing is final. If a student should not be willing to study and apply his time to the classes while here, he's given a chance to work in a mine or other industry for 3 years. Then he may return and try again. While in Irkutsk, there was plenty of time to go out on the streets and sidewalks or parks by yourself and get to know the Russians on your own. Even though you will not find many who can speak English, here in this faraway place from the metropolitan cities, you can leave your party as you wish and stroll through back streets as well as shops and the open-air markets. Getting to know Russians is one of the unique opportunities that comes with a tour of this type. Their habits and various customs that are different from the Western culture, as well as the food found in the restaurants, which will continue to interest you. Other points that will interest you are the old wooden buildings, often embellished by fine wood carving. They're weather-beaten, and they turn my thoughts to what I've heard about those cold Siberian winters, even though the temperature on this day was 80 degrees. As you can see, for the townspeople, much of life centers around the recreation of the beautiful parks and the Angora River. This is the world's largest freshwater lake, and we're about to start a tour by hydrofoil called the Rocket. This is one of the chief attractions of the Irkutsk area, Lake Baikal. We start on a hydroelectric man-made lake, which is called the Sea of Irkutsk. One of the most remarkable bodies of water in the world is Lake Baikal. It's the 8th largest lake in the world in surface area, but it's the largest in volume, and it's the deepest. Lake Baikal contains as much water as all 5 of the Great Lakes of the United States. The USSR Academy of Sciences Museum has on display an interesting collection of the various species of water life which are found in the water. The comfortable hydrofoil took us past villages and farms along the shoreline. The forested areas abound in sable, ermine, and muskrat. Kalinsky is also found here, whose hair is used for paintbrushes. This lake is more than a mile deep today. It's a tourist attraction, and the facilities for lodging and eating are found along the way. The bus ride back was through the forests of Siberia, and it gave us a chance to see the open country and the farms along the way back to the city. And the end of our visit to Irkutsk in Siberia. This is Tashkent. It's the capital of Uzbekistan and has become the great tourist attraction for the lower Central Asian area. More than 3,000 delegations and tourist groups visited this city in the past couple of years. Today, this modern city abounds in monuments. This one to Lenin, the museum, recently completed, shows a modern architecture and design that contrasts sharply with the older buildings from the days of the Khan. The shopping market here was colorful and interesting to visit, with produce brought from the nearby orchards, truck gardens, and melon plots. There's an abundance of grapes, apples, and baked goods, as well as spices, cheap cloth, rice, and sugar. These boys were friendly. They were excited when I handed my camera to one of the group and asked him to take my picture, as this shows the results of his work. This is a beautiful city today. However, on April 26, 1966, a strong earthquake shook Tashkent, caused great damage to the city. More than 75,000 families were left homeless. But living out in the open temporarily, they rebuilt the city, and today it seemed completely restored. Islam, the religion preached by Muhammad, is common here in Uzbekistan. The believers overflow the mosque to occupy much of the yard. A person enters the fold of Islam by believing in the unity of God and the apostleship of Muhammad, but acceptance of the faith implies that one should also believe in Almighty God, the last day, the angels, the books, the prophets, and predestination. This mosque, now in Russia, a Muslim community that in days gone by grew rich and powerful with their trading posts in all of the caravan routes. This was one occasion I enjoyed, a very appetizing lunch out by a lake away from the city center. The food was some of the best I've had in my travels. The Uzbek national cuisine is very rich. The dishes are distinguished for their fine flavor, spices, and excellent taste. And following the meal, native entertainers, the best of Uzbek dances. We've come now to Samarkand, less than a 1-hour flight from Tashkent. And here I felt a sense of humanity stretched out over 2,500 years, as here is seen the exotic oriental character of the most ancient of civilizations. This big cathedral mosque, east of Registan Square, was built by the great Tamerlane, who called his kingdom the center of the world. He built this for his beautiful wife, Bibi Kanin, and its glistening blue dome stood here as the first visible evidence of the city, as swaying caravans came across the desert. In the center, this tremendous granite stand for the scripture, the Holy Koran, standing as the centerpiece for the entire complex. Built in 1404, the faceted blue dome of the Gur-Imur Mausoleum can be seen from afar, rising sharply against the background of the cloudless sky. Tamerlane and his two sons and his grandson, Ulugh lie buried in this tomb. Ulugh, Tamerlane's grandson and great astronomer and mathematician of the 15th century, built this observatory. The results of their observations of the star tables, as computed in the 15th century, stand even today for their accuracy. Ulugh measurement of the duration of the celestial year was in error, according to today's calculation, by only 58 seconds. All the more amazing when we recall that there were no optical instruments in the 15th century. Here on the southeastern slope of the Afrasiab stand the Shiki Zinda necropolis. An inscription says, "This majestic building has been founded by Abdul Aziz Khan, son of Ulugh in 1435. The outstanding architectural monuments of Samarkand, which compete with masterpieces of world architecture, testify to the high level of the arts in the Central Asia, an area that has been stirring the imagination of wayfarers for many centuries. The crossroads of conquerors, Arabs, Turks, Tartar Mongols, Samarkand, ancient center of world culture." This is Moscow, the capital of the USSR, its political, administrative, and cultural center. It is the capital of the largest of the Soviet republics, which constitute the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. Our hotel, the Russia, 6,000 beds, one of the largest hotels in the world. The first mention of Moscow in old Russian chronicles dates back to the year 1147, which has been taken as the year of its founding. The red brick walls of the Kremlin date back to 1485 to 1495, when the wall was completed. The towers were added later. The Kremlin, a monument of Russian and world architecture, the history of the Russian people recorded in stone. Across from our hotel, the Russia, we start a walking tour of the Red Square and the Kremlin. First, we have in view the Cathedral of St. Basil the Blessed, a combination of 9 convoluted domes of various designs and colors, swirled, striped, and plaid. Everyone who comes here as a tourist has a picture taken here, and I did too. The changing of the guard in Red Square at the entrance to Lenin's tomb is always an important occasion for the tourist photographers. On the days when the tomb is open to visitors in rain or snow, long lines of people stand for hours waiting for an opportunity to view the remains of Vladimir Ilyich Lenin, leader of the Russian Revolution in 1917 and founder of the Soviet Republic. Inside the Kremlin, this bronze and granite statue of Lenin was unveiled recently. Near Red Square, and still on our walking tour of the Kremlin, is Alexandrovsky Garden, which extends along the Kremlin wall. And here, the tomb of the unknown soldier, a monument to those who perished in the war against the Nazi invaders. A perpetual flame burns in the tombstone. On the day of my visit, a Russian movie crew was in the process of making a film, and these are some of my pictures of what was taking place. Inside the Kremlin, we first see the arsenal with these huge cannon, built from melted down church bells by Peter the Great during the Great War against Sweden in 1700 to 1720. The Kremlin Palace of Congresses, built in 1960, one of the most important buildings in Moscow. And it was here I enjoyed Tchaikovsky's Swan Lake by the famous Bolshoi. The Cathedral of the 12 Apostles stands nearby and was built in the 16th century. It was linked to the Patriarch's Palace by tunnels, enabling the movement between important buildings without leaving cover. The Tsar cannon, cast in 1586, a superb example of the skill attained by early Russian craftsmen in casting. It's always a favorite location for tourists to take a few more snapshots. The Tsar's bell from the 18th century. And the belfry of Ivan the Great. It served as a watchtower when originally built in 1508, and in the days of Boris Godunov was extended to its present height. It suffered an explosion in 1812 when Napoleon tried to destroy it. Napoleon, according to Tolstoy, said when he saw the city of Moscow and was taking it for his prize, he said, "This Asiatic city with its innumerable churches, Moscow the Holy, a strange, beautiful and grand city. She lies at my feet, her golden domes and crosses flashing and twinkling in the sun." Even so, the French emperor stabled his horses in the cathedrals and he tried to destroy the towers. Moscow is a city of gardens and parks, where thousands of trees and shrubs are planted every year, with many of the parks devoted to children's activities. And there are children's stores as well. This is Moscow University, located atop Lenin Hill above the Moscow River. The university has 1,000 scientific laboratories, 37 buildings, which besides the halls of learning, houses students, teachers, and professors. Moscow is a city of 7 million, ever growing, with the housing program completing 350 new apartments every day. Moscow has excellent museums which are very popular to visitors to the capital city. One of many of these is the Pushkin Fine Arts Museum. It contains a very large collection of paintings, sculpture, and historical pieces from many centuries back. An unusual sight in Moscow is this huge Olympic-sized swimming pool, claimed to be the world's largest. The enormous pool operates even in below-zero weather with its heated water. After seeing the attractions of the city, and before spending too much on taxis, I took a shopping trip through the Berezovka shop, a store which you must remember that they only accept foreign currency and not Russian rubles. Leningrad, the beloved St. Petersburg of Peter the Great. It's a European-looking city on the Gulf of Finland. He had the whole city built to order by the French and Italian architects, and it has a checkerboard layout of wide avenues, parks, squares, and canals. In what the Russians call the Patriotic War, the Germans besieged the city for 900 days, and almost 2 million people starved to death. A miraculous equestrian sculpture of Peter the Great, the founder of the city. Construction of St. Isaac Cathedral lasted for 40 years and required the toil of 460,000 serfs. Standing in the courtyard of the great Palace Square, modeled after Versailles, it is not hard to imagine what the scene was like when the Bolsheviks stormed the palace during the October Revolution. Within the Winter Palace are the apartments of the Tsars, now a museum housing the wonderful art of the Hermitage. The largest collection of objects of art and antiques in the world, comprising over 2,500,000 exhibits. The collection includes pieces of primitive and antique sculpture and valuable ethnographical exhibits. a reminder of the revolution, the battleship Aurora, which fired its cannon as a signal to the Bolsheviks to storm the Winter Palace. And this is Peterhof, the summer palace of Peter the Great, where hundreds of fountains are terraced down the palace grounds, along a narrow strip of a canal to the Gulf of Finland, the same waters that saw the coming of King Charles XII to Sweden, who destroyed the Tsar's army in 1700. However, Peter came back 15 years later, stronger than ever, and wiped out entirely the Swedish forces, King Charles barely escaping with his life. Then Peter retired here from the war, devoted himself to building this beautiful city of Petersburg, now Leningrad, the European-looking city, where we end our visit to the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics.
This same interesting tour you've just seen is available for the summer of 1971 by Alaska Airlines. And added to all the exciting places shown is the swinging resort town of Sochi on the Black Sea. Sochi is a busy seaport city with parks and groves of unusual and exotic trees and shrubs, as well as beautifully landscaped health spas for which the region is noted. You'll visit a tea plantation overlooking the mountains of the Caucasus and try tea tasting in a Russian Tsar-style tea house. Also included will be a gala dinner and entertainment in an authentic, colorful Caucasian village restaurant, and a cruise by hydrofoil on the Black Sea to Gagra, and the spectacular mountain drive to beautiful Lake Ritsa, called one of the most attractive areas of the USSR. Leaving from Anchorage, Alaska, with flights over the pole and across the Pacific to Siberia, with highlights in Middle Asia and the Black Sea area, this unique 15-day tour for 1971 can be booked with a choice of 12 departure dates starting June 12. For information and reservations, the Alaska Airlines all-inclusive tours for 1971 to Siberia and the other interesting areas of Russia, get in touch with your travel agent or your nearest Alaska Airlines office.
Течет река Волга, течет река Волга, конца и края нет, среди хлебов